Thank you. Please join them, come back, join. How do you say herding cats? All right, good afternoon again, everyone. We will start now, please, the National Federation's meeting for Racice, which is a chance to review with you the 4 review projects of 2017. We are live on YouTube with this so that those of you around the world who cannot join us physically in Racice, you can follow this process of the 4 review projects. So as Jean-Christophe said, as a result of Tokyo, we've created 4 project iterations and the stakeholders of the sport, leading to different milestones and decisions. The 4 projects are Rule 36, which is the World Championship program. We'll discuss that in a minute. The review of lightweight rowing following the vote in Tokyo and the consequences of that vote and the Olympic Committee's Executive Board decision. Para-rowing. After 3 Paralympic cycles, we felt it was time, particularly with the extension to 2,000 meters for para-rowing, to have a review of the discipline of our sport, touching on many areas, including equipment and materials. Last is the Olympic qualification system, which we will cover in quite a bit of detail today. So just to remind everyone of the timelines of these 4 projects, the Rule 36, the World Championship Program project, will result in a vote by the National Federation delegates at the Congress 2017 FISA Congress in Sarasota, Bradenton, Florida. The Tokyo Extraordinary Congress passed the authority to the Ordinary Congress to vote on that. But a key milestone is the decision of the IOC Executive Board on the Olympic program and the Olympic quota. And then the two dates, the key dates, are the 2nd of July and the 2nd of August for the National Federation proposals and the issuing of the agenda papers. On the Olympic qualification system, we're leading to several dates to discuss. The upcoming National Federations meeting in each of the FISA events, but a final debate and discussion at the Congress in Sarasota, leading to the Council decision of what we propose to the IOC. And it will be the IOC's decision on what they decide is the correct Olympic qualification system, but with strong, of course, strong contribution from the international federations. For lightweight rowing and para rowing, we're going to take 2 years to go through these reviews. In the first year, 2017, will be mainly focused on the World Championship program related to those two disciplines. And you'll see, if you read through the website papers, they're studying many other aspects of these two disciplines, which will take a bit longer time to reflect on and to reach conclusions. The goal is in 2018 at the FISA Congress to have reached conclusions on the key aspects of para rowing and lightweight rowing, which would lead to rule changes or bylaw changes. But we're taking 2 years to do the whole review of these two disciplines. We'll be focused on the impact of the World Championship programs in those two disciplines. Okay, so that's the timeline, and we have the NF meetings, just to review. We have Poznan, we have Lucerne, we have Plovdiv, and we have Trakai. And we'll have the chance, everyone will have the chance to participate at those meetings. We have a link on the website to contribute from the internet, any ideas or thoughts. And every presentation is posted after each NF meeting on the internet site. Next. Okay, let's go into the first, next, which will be me. Okay, so we'll start with Rule 36, and Colleen Orsman, our new sport director, will cover the principles of the Olympic qualification system. So I wanted in the last National Federation meeting in Belgrade, we established the terms of reference, most of which I just discussed with you, and you can read this from the website. It's already on the website, with the key milestones leading to the Congress vote at the Sarasota Bradenton. We will have a single block proposal so that we can carefully assess the athlete pathways through all of the disciplines and not go event by event and debate. We want a clear block proposal which addresses all of the principles and the athlete pathways. And if there are multiple proposals against the current program, we will have votes at an absolute majority to narrow down to the proposal which is put against the existing program, and it will require a 2/3 vote to replace the existing program. Okay, next. Key influences we discussed, the Olympic program decision by the IOC. We all agreed that we needed to have that before we could really finalize ours. And then, as I've described, it will be a vote on a block. That will be valid for 3 years, 2018, 19, and 20. And then the next chance to review Rule 36 would be the next Extraordinary Congress, which would be in 2021. Okay, next. So this is the existing program of World Championship events. The discipline or gender, and the boat class. And I can honestly say that we have not given careful and full consideration to athlete pathways or up to now on principles to establish this program. And that's why it's really important to us on both the Olympic qualification systems before we dive in to the detail. Next. So with the working group on this project, we've established that we want to consider these 7 principles, and we'll go into a slide on each one. We'll go into the slides, but those are the ones that we've established, and now we'll take a few minutes to talk about each one. Excellence. We thought it was important to state the World Championships, number one importance is excellence. The best athletes should be competing at our World Championships. We thought about a minimum standard to have a credible event at the World Championships, and that means that there should be at least 2 rounds raced, so 7 or more entries. We wanted to make a principle about that and really establish what is the value. The value of a World Championship medal requires 2 races, requires at least 6 other competitors. So we wanted to put that out there as a principle and also discuss the pathways of our World Championships leading to the peak of the athlete's career. Next. Participation. We wanted to put a point about participation in the sense that the boat classes offered on our World Championship program provide sufficient opportunities in the different disciplines, the different types of rowing that we have. So we thought we'd put that as a principle, number 2, when we consider our World Championship programs. And this presentation will be posted on the website after our meeting. Next. Gender equality. We didn't put gender equity, we put gender equality. As we've said, and as we said in Tokyo, sport is a key means for society to break down barriers and reduce gender discrimination. FISA supports the goal of gender equality in FISA events. This, at the Olympic Games, the Paralympic Games, and the Youth Olympic Games, is done in numbers of athletes and in boat classes. And we will discuss in the Olympic qualification system numbers of boat classes and quota places. Question for us is when and how fast shall we achieve gender equality? Because at the World Championships without a quota, we only have the numbers of boat classes, and we hope that we can produce the equivalent number of athletes in each gender. So this is a key part of this review, and many believe we should do it straight away, but we put it out there as a principle to discuss. Next. Okay, the Spectator Experience attractive program. Again, the key window that we own and control to present our sport is the World Championships. It's the most important way people see our sport on television. It gets the most broadcast hours, the most broadcast countries, so we need to keep this in mind when we are talking about our World Championships. It is the window to our sport for most of the people in the world who will see our sport. The number of final days should create interest, attractiveness, but be appropriate for the budgets of the teams and organizing committees. And there's a discussion about the number of days, that we should give that some thought for the budgets of the teams, and the size of the World Championships for the budgets of the organizing committees. And like we said earlier, a minimum number of crews in each event to to include at least 2 rounds. And ideally semifinals, because as you've seen today, some semifinals are equally attractive for us as finals. Next, please. Balance of the different boat classes, sweep and sculling, long and short. You'll see some words here describing what we discussed in Tokyo, balancing between the different types of disciplines, long and short, and that we need to keep that in mind. Some nations are only able to enter small boats because of depth of talent, etc. So we put that as a principle that needs to be considered when we make this program. Next. We put this here, lightweight and para, to make sure we incorporate the views of those working groups, those review areas, so that they are fully considered as disciplines, respected disciplines in our sport. And we need to continue to fill out the description of this principle, but that's where we are at this point. And number 7, pathways. This was raised, I think, at the Tokyo Congress as an important point when we consider this, and you saw a slide earlier. We'll talk about that a little bit more now, next coming up. So those are the 7 principles that we have identified that we want to have in mind when we're considering our World Championship programs. Next. So we've made a slide, and actually we're going to put in the FISU Championships. They have just adjusted their program to be gender equal in terms of the events offered, and it could be considered a path, part of the pathway for an athlete. As we said, we will work with the continental confederations and groups to work in the pathways from the continental events, Coupe de la Jeunesse, Baltic Cup, Balkan Cup, etc., leading through the continental events. But this is a slide we want to make for each of the proposed programs that we will make on the next step after we've finalized the principles. Next, female rowers. We will put in FISU and then have continental events. So this is showing the number of seats in each of the disciplines and giving you an idea of where you go. Next, and para, it's still being developed. There was a question to put para in the European Championships in the future, so we will be discussing that. Next, okay, we've listed some key questions and considerations. We want a mission statement or purpose for the World Championships, and we're close to having that. What are the criteria for including a boat class? We've have several slides discussing that. Should we reach full gender equality immediately? This is what we have to consider. Minimum entry threshold, like we've discussed, having at least 2 rounds, having at least 6 opponents, and then the pathways leading to the ultimate competition. Next. Okay, first we've put some words to describe this, so you can have a look at that, but go home and have a look at it on your own, because we're developing this each National Federation meeting, each of them during the year, but this is a kind of a summary of what answers to the first key question. Next. Criteria for including a boat class. Is it on the Olympics, for example, pathways, national continental events, gender equality, inclusion, balance, tradition and history, attractiveness. So we're continuing to evolve each of these. Next. Should we have 50-50 in the first go in 2018? And what criteria should we measure gender equality? Like I said, we only have for our events, the events, we don't have quotas, but participation will be an important influence in deciding how far we go on our events. Next, entry threshold. We have to discuss the natural death rule, which was a convenient solution we found in the years past to try to implement this minimum criteria. Many believe that it's really important we have strong fields in each event so that the medals have the same value, perceived value. Or should we take preventative action, preemptive action, on an event or on a program? We had a submission by email. Why don't we just include the Olympic events and get rid of everything else? All the way through. This came in by email. And a certain person at the last National Federations meeting suggested that we eliminate lightweight sweep rowing at the senior level, and that after under 23, all lightweights are directed either to the open sweep boats or the lightweight sculling boats. This is another, let's say, preemptive action that someone put out there for discussion. Next. How does the Senior World Championship program influence the under 23s and juniors? What's the effect of other programs, other events out there on our programs? For example, for the Youth Olympic Games, we've selected the singles and the pairs. And the influence, by having made that selection, on participation in sweep rowing in pairs has greatly expanded. So that's an example of a programming decision that has influenced other parts of our sport. And the growth in pairs rowing in the continents has been dramatic, thanks to the Youth Olympic Games decision. Next. So we covered the key principles. We've briefly addressed key questions. So now let's stop for a moment, and you're welcome to make any comments on any of these points or suggestions, or you're against this or that. So let's open the floor for anyone who would like to contribute. Yes? Could you say your name and your country?
Yes, Chris Esmondy from the Dutch Rowing Federation. In all these principles and questions, sometimes money is mentioned. And like most things in life, at the end of the day, money is often a driver of many decisions. And what we in the Netherlands face, and I'm guessing that most federations will face similar dilemmas, is that most of our funding comes from the National Olympic Federation at a state level. And that's very much driven by whatever the Olympic events are. So as soon as events are excluded from the Olympics, it basically means that the funding stops right away. And it will be very difficult for national federations to invest in those events or even send teams participating in those events. So my fear is that if you exclude the lightweight sweep rowing, for instance, from the Olympics, that sweep rowing for lightweights will start to disappear almost automatically in a number of years. Where you can still have events, but that will be club events, basically FISA or other, or FISU, sort of other type of events, but not on the highest level of excellence that we expect on World Championships in general. So that is my consideration.
Thank you. I think the person that made the comment in Belgrade had the idea that we continue to offer more events, continue to offer lightweight sweep events up to under 23, but then when they pass under 23, they're directed either to open sweep, open sculling, or lightweight sculling. So it's a valid question or a valid comment. I do want to say that another factor is you need to know that Aigues Ballette was at the limit in participation. We nearly crashed the organizing committee on the number of entries, number of buses, number of meals, etc. And we are facing fewer venues that can handle the size that we had in Eekballett. So we're giving consideration, not right away, but maybe we have to have quotas, because organizing committees, we were lucky they had the full support of their regional government, but we were really near the threshold of surpassing their capacity. So this is something also in our minds, not right away, but we're reaching that point. Anyone else like to comment? Norbert?
Norbert Lambing from the Austrian Rowing Federation. Now coming to this, adding to what the Dutch said, I think it's a very, very fragile issue if now going to the way that only Olympic boat classes can be at their World Championships. I think this will slowly bring a dropout rate into the rowers, and because some of the athletes competing in Olympic boat classes or fall out, they still have to step as a substitute to go in the non-Olympic boat classes, and bring in the quota for World Championships. Then you also have to think about bringing quotas onto the entries of the federations.
Okay, let me repeat. The comment about the Olympic program was one person, one provocative comment out there, but I think with money and support in mind. It's not the view of anyone in particular. It was one comment that we wanted to put in it as a provocative comment about the realities that are somewhere out there. Anyone else? Anyone? Let's try this. Anyone strongly disagree with anything that was said today, or any of these principles or questions? Okay, so what the process, we'd like you to go home and think about this. We'll have another meeting in Poznan. You can contribute at any point by email through the internet, through the FISA site. You'll find all of these presentations on the site, all the background papers, the FISA strategic plan, the event principles document that we developed pre-Tokyo, and each of the PowerPoint presentations. I wanted to make sure I said that we are focusing on today on Rule 36 and the Olympic qualification system, and take a little more time in Poznan on para rowing, where we have the para events and hopefully the para coordinators and lightweight. So that's why today, given the time frame, we're going to focus on these two projects mainly. Okay, I'll close this Rule 36. We have time at the end also if you think of something in the meantime. And we'll ask Colleen Orsman to present about the Olympic qualification system.
So just to introduce this topic, a reminder of what we're really trying to do through this review process. We have to develop an Olympic qualification system proposal that will be submitted to the IOC. And what that proposal needs to consider is, firstly, how we will allocate the number of athlete quota places that we have between the boat classes, between the Olympic events. So obviously we are waiting for news from the IOC on what the Olympic events will be and what our athlete quota is. And then once we've done that, we need to decide how we will distribute those qualification places between the World Championships, the Continental Qualification events, and the final qualification regatta. We thought it would be a good idea at this point to, since we're talking about principles, is to discuss or to share with you what the IOC's principles are in terms of what they believe the qualification principles should be. Firstly, excellence. It means the best athletes should be participating in the Olympic Games. and that the universality or participation aspect is achieved through the Continental Qualification events. And thirdly, finally, they believe that each athlete should have more than one chance to qualify for the Games. So these are all fairly aligned to our principles. The key principles that were identified by our working group and the executive committee were, again, excellence, but how do we weight excellence against participation or universality? That we should have 2 chances to qualify for the Games, or should we? That we need to distribute the quota places between the events to ensure that we have an attractive program for spectators and for TV viewers. And that we need to maximize the number of NOCs that are participating in the rowing event at the Olympic Games. And finally, linked again to the World Championship program, we want to have a balance between sculling and sweep events. So the first principle, excellence and participation. In a nutshell, excellence is achieved through the qualification through the World Championships and the final Olympic qualification regatta. And universality or participation is achieved through the Continental Qualification events. It's pretty simple, but as you'll see further down the line, this forms it's a pretty hard line for us to take, and it will inform the qualification system that we eventually reach. Okay. So 2 chances to qualify. Historically, in our qualification system, our athletes have always had 2 chances to qualify. So the first being at the World Championships, and the second either at the Continental event or at the final Olympic qualification regatta. So we've seen that this is a principle that the IOC supports, and it's one that we, in principle, support as well. But the question is it still valid, and is it still valid for all of the boat classes? The question was raised at the previous NF meeting. What about the 8s? Does it make sense and is it viable for national federations to support an 8 all the way through to the final qualification regatta? Or would it be more practical and make more sense to have one qualification event at the World Championships only? It's a question that's out there. The attractive program. I think the key point that we want to put through on this principle is that, as Matt mentioned, an attractive program is usually going to involve at least 3 or 4 rounds of competition, preferably 4. We want to have semi-finals because they are almost as exciting as the finals. So in distributing the quota places between the events, we want to have as many semi-finals as possible in the program. We also need to have as many medal days as possible, and I think we can all agree that moving from 2 to 4 medal days has had an incredibly positive effect on the rowing program. So this is the attractiveness is obviously an important factor for spectators on site who are buying tickets for the event, but the massive aspect of the Olympic Games is really TV viewership and how many people are watching the rowing competition from day to day, minute to minute, and this is an incredibly important performance indicator for the rowing event at the Olympics. So principle 4 is maximizing participation. So this is where, as a federation and as a sport of rowing, we want to ensure that as many national federations and national Olympic committees are participating in the rowing event as possible. What it translates to is the more national NOCs that have rowers competing at the Olympic Games, it means the more support on a global basis we have for our sport. So this is an incredibly important principle for us to uphold and to promote in the qualification system. Just as a note, a factoid from our development program, we increased the amount of spending on our development program between 2012 and 2016. And we increased by 50% the number of quota places that were taken up by these athletes. So it was really a very positive effect on our system, on our participation in the Olympics. So now we come into the interesting part. We have a number of scenarios that we have come up, the working group and the executive committee have come up with, and how we can achieve these principles and these objectives through the qualification system. So we have kind of two areas that we're working on. The first would be to cap or to try and limit participation on the excellence side at the upper level. So the first scenario, we have 6 scenarios. The first would be to limit the number of boats that would qualify, that an NOC could qualify at the World Championships. But not overall, meaning that there would be a limit to the number at the World Championships, but continental and final Olympic qualification is still open to everyone. The second scenario would be limiting the total number of boats that an NOC or a national federation could qualify for the games. So we have 14, say we have 14 boat classes. Do we limit the total number of crews that you can have at the Olympics to 10, 12, 8? The number at this point is not the issue. What we're talking about is the principle. And the third scenario here would be to limit participation at the continental regattas. So if you've done well enough at the World Championships, do we say you're no longer able to participate at the continental events? The second category would be talking about broadening participation at the lower end of the performance spectrum. Our first scenario would be to maintain the system as it is. So for the Rio Games, we limited qualification through the continental events to 1 boat class per gender, to 1 boat per gender. To take that a step further, there is a scenario whereby we limit qualification at the continental events to 1 boat per national federation, either men or women's boat. And then in the third scenario, we would allocate any freed up places. So if you qualify or eligible in 2 categories but can only take 1 of those boats, the place that is released would go to a federation that has not yet qualified any boats. So this would also be a new scenario. Okay, so this is just to run through again in a bit more detail these scenarios. The first one, we limit the number of boats that can qualify at the World Championships. I think we can talk about this. We do see a number of downsides to this scenario and a number of complications. It can be, for example, you can have a federation that qualifies, say the number is 10 places. They qualify 11 boats at the World Championships. 1 boat is not qualified. It's a tricky situation, but it's a scenario that's on the table for discussion. So here we have the second scenario, which is limiting the total number again. And here we would have a number of scenarios. Say you qualify 10 boats at the World Championships, you can still continue on to the Continental Regatta and qualify there. If you, through the Continental event, you achieve your maximum, then you're no longer allowed to participate at the final qualification. So it's again, it's a scenario that's on the table up for discussion. Yeah, this is the third scenario, which would be to say if you've achieved a certain amount, and this is considering the fact that continental qualification events are there to support participation. So do we apply the principle that if you already have a strong participation through your qualification at the World Championships, do we say that you may no longer be allowed to participate in the continental qualification event? In this scenario, because the final qualification regatta is still considered the excellence route, all federations would still be allowed to participate at the final qualification regatta. Okay. This is the one boat per gender system that was applied for Rio. On the upside, it did increase quite significantly the number of federations that were participating in the Olympics. On the downside, it created some very difficult situations for federations, having to choose between two qualified boats, and we also had a situation whereby boats were allocated onto other federations that had already a decent number of boats qualified. So it wasn't a perfect system, but it did achieve a good result for the sport of rowing as a whole.
Go back one.
Yes, sir. So, our proposal here is that if we were to maintain the system, the way to improve it would be to introduce an objective way in which to identify which of the crews qualified would be qualified. So, for example, the first stage would be ranking. If you have a men's crew and a women's, or two women's crews, one ranked first and the other ranked second, clear that the boat ranked first would be qualified. If both crews had the same ranking, we would look to something like a percentage of world best time to say which of those crews would be qualified. And in this, we would be trying to push as well the excellence, so that we are maintaining and encouraging a level of performance through the continents. All right, the next scenario is the more extreme version, whereby only one boat per national federation would qualify. The upside of this is we could increase quite significantly the number of federations that are participating in the Olympic Games. Again, it would result in some difficult situations for teams, but again, we would advocate a system whereby it's a very objective way in which crews are identified for qualification based on rank and based on percentage of world best time. And then the final scenario is making sure that we would allocate any unused places or returned places to a federation that has not yet qualified any crews. I think this is a fairly simple one. Yeah, that is relating to the continental regattas only. And if we had to look at the order in which those places would be reallocated, it would be firstly within that continental group, and then if there were no further eligible crews, it would return to the general pool. Our fifth principle is talking about the balance between sweep and sculling, and whether we should introduce pairs events at the Continental Qualification regattas. We believe, we've seen, as Matt mentioned before, that this had a very positive effect on the participation of sweep boats in the Youth Olympic Games qualification and at the youth level. We had really quite a dramatic increase in the number of pairs entered in events at the junior level, simply as a result of introducing this event in the Continental Qualification. And we believe it would also be a very positive step in creating more pathways for sweep rowers and strengthening particularly women's sweep rowing. The minute you introduce another boat class at the continental level, we believe it would open up avenues for funding, increased funding from NOCs for those extra boats. So this is just a chart that shows the increase in the participation in the pairs events as a result of introducing the pairs in the yard and in the continental qualification events. So in 2010, when there was only one chance to qualify for the pair, which was at the Junior World Champs, we had, for example, 16 women's pairs entered. By opening it up and placing a pairs event in the Continental Regatta, we had then 29 junior women's pairs participating. So it's a fairly significant increase. this is a general point that it's something for us to reflect on, is that rowing, we all know, has a very big athlete quota in the games. In Rio and the previous games, we've had the third biggest quota. But if you look at the number of NOCs that we have participating in rowing, we are quite a bit further down the ranking. So we had calculated that we were around 16th position in terms of NOC participation out of the Olympic sports. We believe that if we could implement some of these scenarios that we've suggested, we would move up to between 8th or 10th place. This is just a visual showing the position of our athlete quota versus NOC participation. And these are just a few more scenarios that we've looked at. If we were to implement some of the scenarios, what effect they could have in terms of participation of NOCs. So on the left we have the scenario whereby we would limit to each NF either one boat per gender or one boat per NF. One per gender, we would have 69. We had 69 in Rio. Had we used a system of only one boat per NF, we would have had 101 national federations. And this is looking at introducing the pairs and the effect that we could have had if we'd introduced pairs into the Continental Qualification. So that's it. Those are the principles, the scenarios. We've added a few of the questions that we are asking about the qualification system, and we would like to hear your thoughts.
So we open the floor to comments, reactions to some of these proposals. Anyone want to start and make a comment? Okay, yes.
Thank you. Here, Chris Asbandi from Dutch Federation again. In general, I think it's rather difficult to apply the scenarios to all events at the same time. I mean, if you have small boat events or big boat events, it's quite a difference in terms of quota places and number of boats that you can qualify in the first place. And I can imagine that you don't want to apply one scenario across all the events, but you must almost look per event what kind of scenario would help to basically reach certain objectives. So I would really be cautious in terms of applying broad-scale scenarios across all events, because I think that might generate unwanted consequences.
Thank you for that. Say your name and country, please.
Yeah, hello, Mariana Riska from Finland. To continue on Dutch Federation, I would like to raise into discussion about the singles or small boats quota in European Continental or Final Qualification regatta. So let's say, for example, in single, we have in total 32 singles in Rio, but from Europe, there's just like 12 places available, and to increase the universality and also the excellence, I think that's something that we need to discuss. We have, for example, in Europe, quite many small nations, such as Finland, of course, which don't have that big depth in the rowing program, but we could have small boats such as singles, doubles, pairs. So just to raise that thing in the discussion.
Yeah, it's been in all the discussions that we don't want to lose the developed federations' participation at the games. We all know how critical it is to participate in the games, to be on the radar of the sport ministry and the National Olympic Committee. So we totally agree with what you said. It would be a big loss for us to lose a developed federation from participating in the games. Norbert?
Norbert from Austria again. Referring to point number 3, limits on qualification at Continental Qualification regattas. It has been also talked about in Tokyo that maybe the reallocating the continental countries with their own continent qualifications. So if a European qualification without New Zealand, USA, Canada, is that up for discussion?
Okay, good point. We'll add that into the consideration. Returning them to make an America's qualification, but perhaps with some of the limitations we have, could make it work. We'll put that back on the list. Okay, I wanted to underline drawing a clear line between excellence and participation, protecting the excellence opportunities as much as possible for pure excellence. It's really important. Participation, the 4 boats at the Continental Qualification regattas, why are we doing that? It's for participation. And to get a national federation into the Olympic Games changes everything in that country for the sport of rowing. So that's why we're putting up these proposals at only the Continental Qualification events to maximize the number of national federations in the Games. To have 2 from medium-sized country and continents and not have this national federation, what do we achieve? 1 or 2 boats. So we want to really have a serious discussion about that principle to see where we go with that. And that would apply to Europe as well, for the 2 singles and the 2 lightweight doubles at Lucerne, but for the European qualification, applying that. So in those categories, you would get 1. In the other 10 categories, it's excellence, it's protected. You would still have full participation there to show your excellence and qualify through excellence. So really interesting points that we have to consider. What we'd like to do is, this will be on the website, go home, carefully think about it and read it, and send us your ideas. We're going to start now on the next phase to put numbers and ideas out there, but we wanted to really spend some time on these principles, try to get your feedback. We'll go to our working groups, to the executive committee, to continue to evolve these presentations so that we can arrive at specific proposals. Okay. Okay, this is to point out that on the website there's a link to contribute your idea, your thought, your suggestion. You will stay anonymous, so you can be provocative if you want. But there's, on the website, you'll find this link to make suggestions or comments, or make comments against some of these points. An additional point that, to one of Colleen's point is, it has been raised at National Federation conferences to limit the upper end, the number of boats a federation can have. And the number I think I heard at one was 10. And we've been studying that, and I just wanted to present a scenario. Country A qualifies 10 at the World Championships. They're finished. Country B qualifies 9, and they can continue on to the final qualification regatta and qualify additional boats. It's really hard. On the excellence side, you qualify for the games in the excellence categories, and we say, sorry, it's 10, you can't go to the games. I don't think any of us are really at all comfortable with that, but that is playing out that scenario, what could possibly happen. Additionally, there have been a particular country that didn't qualify the men's 8 the last 2 times and had to go to the final qualification regatta in order to qualify the men's 8. If that country qualified 10 in the other categories, and was eliminated or was prevented from trying to qualify at the final qualification regatta, that would be a pretty big drama for that country and that country's broadcasting company, which pays a lot of attention to rowing. Okay, those were just, we're trying to put the pluses and minuses on each of these. We have discussed all of these with the IOC, and so that we don't present you something that is completely crazy and out of the range of the IOC, and they aren't particularly comfortable with this cap on the maximum participation, to say it, but on the idea of limiting participation at the continental event if you've achieved X number of places at the World Championships. Those athletes in the singles and the lightweight doubles can still go to other boats. So if your country, if it's 8 or 9 at the World Championships, you would, and we make the rule that you could not go to the Continental Qualification regatta in those 4 boats, but you're free for the other 10 boats to go to the final qualification regatta. They're comfortable with that because those athletes have a good chance at the World Championships to show excellence. Their country has shown excellence by qualifying a large number of boats, and they could still qualify additional in the 10 boats that are the final qualification regatta. Okay, it's confusing enough as it is. We'll stop there. Please read it carefully, have a think, go home and talk to your colleagues, send us your feedback, and we'll continue this process in Poznan.
Yeah, just to conclude the session, thank you for attending this meeting. I think it's very important that we have this approach to give you all this step by step where we are on this journey. I would like very briefly to take the opportunity to thank all the contributors. I must say that the working groups are working very well. We have very good people in these working groups, and also the staff, the FISA staff, were putting all these ideas together and to present that kind of product or element. I think it's a very good exercise. We need it. It's worth to have, and I'm very pleased with this the way we are proceeding, so that we are sure that by the Congress we will be in a position to take the best decisions. So thank you for your contributions, and thank you for all of those who are really working hard to make this exercise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that Dusan will invite everyone to the bar before the nation's dinner. Dusan, could you give us the next steps, please?
Thank you. Well, we organized a nation's dinner not far from here, just roughly 100 meters from here, in the big white tent downstairs, and it's like an experiment, not to commute too long. So the nation's dinner will start 8:30. 6:30. So I missed 18:30, 6:30. So sorry, I missed. Please welcome all of you downstairs to the big white tent.
No drinks?
Why is it?